I never noticed that the ancient tree man's loincloth appears to be the same color and material as his little chin beard there, which is disturbing. Let's move on from that immediately. Today I've got a Wood Elves versus a Nurgle Domination game with the new, longer Domination setup. I'm interested to kind of see how the meta shakes out. I haven't really had a lot of chance to play it myself yet. I've been busy with some other things, but I have got quite a few good replays to show you guys. Today, this Wood Elf replay coming in from Goblin Cleaver. He's gone with an interesting build. He's got an Ancient Tree Man here with some Eternal Guards and some War Dancers. War Dancers generally perceived to be pretty terrible in Domination because they're so squishy. They have a hard time actually holding objectives, but we'll see. He's also got a Forest Dragon, some Hawk Riders, Nurgle, his opponent, coming in with a Soul Grinder, some Marauders over here to kind of protect. Some Marauders here with Festus, a couple of Exalted Plague Bearers. Let's take a look at the reserves real quick. For the Wood Elves reserves, we've got Wild Hunters of Kurnos, a single unit of Great Stag Knights, Firebark Elders, very nice pick to light some Nurgle units on fire so they can't heal quite as much. A couple of regular Wild Riders, Starfire Shafts as well, again for fire damage, and a bit of Key Armor Piercing in case of Great Weapon Warriors. And a couple of Eternal Guards with shields. Nurgle didn't bring any Great Weapon Warriors, but they do have a couple of Knights here. An Exalted Hero on foot, it looks like. A Demon Spew, a couple of regular Forsaken, Plague Toads, Chaos Furies, and one unit of Nurglings. Yeah, also in the starting army, we've got these Poison Warhounds that you saw there. Nurglings coming in on the side, but the Forest Dragon immediately going to swoop in and fight this Soul Grinder and melee. The Hawk Riders also have armor-piercing damage and a decent charge bonus in a big surround like this. They're definitely going to take some damage, but supporting the dragon with these fast, hard-hitting flying units is pretty smart. Like I said, armor-piercing damage, 42 charge, so on the charge, they'll definitely get some pretty good hits in, help contribute a little bit of damage here, and then be able to run back up into the air there. Very nicely done. The other thing about the Forest Dragon, too, I mean, does have physical resistance, but has magic damage, almost like a demon. I mean, obviously doesn't have demonic-type leadership, but similar to most demonic units, does have magic damage and 20% physical resistance, and that means it will trade pretty well into things like Soul Grinders. Not that the Soul Grinder's that great of a single entity to begin with, but certainly 440 weapon strength, a little bit less on here, but that's 60 charge, better overall combat stats, better mass. One thing to note interesting about this Wood Elf build is a lot of these units do have quite a bit of experience chevrons going on, but Wild Hunters of Kurnos coming out and then pulling back, trying to draw these Chaos Nurgle Knights out of position, but the Nurgle Knights do hit their charge animation, and with the poison hitting the Wild Hunters there, they're significantly speed debuffed. They're just going to turn around again. Great supporting rear charge here with the Hawk Riders to kind of draw away some of those Knights and deal some damage. Meanwhile, over on the other side, Festus duking it out with the Tree Lord. Got the Winterheart Guards, Unbreakable Eternal Guard, or Regiment of Renown in here, I believe, or is this just regular? No, they're just regular Eternal Guards under the Lorelorn color scheme, I believe this is. Very appropriate to be fighting Festus with Lorelorn here, because, of course, he starts very close by. And Festus himself should be able to hold out. They are going to kind of wet noodle each other mostly. Although the Ancient Tree Man does have pretty good armor-piercing damage. Not the greatest combat stats in the world, but definitely can dish serious damage with Dwellers below. You guys may have seen on my recent video, this is the Vortex you should be taking now, and I do think that it means that, like High Elves and Wood Elves in particular, maybe less so for Empire and Bretonnia. Certainly, though, factions with access to Dwellers and like strong, different units should be, especially like strong mid-tier infantry, which is kind of where the High Elves come in. It should be pretty good in Domination. We'll see. I've seen a lot of people saying the artillery is also pretty good right now, and I need to kind of explore that a little bit myself. Artillery, Lore of Life, maybe, Empire actually finally will work in Domination with that kind of being the meta, but we'll see. Again, I'm not sure how things are going to play out. Nurgle Knights end up overextending, but still get some pretty good value back in that engagement, up to almost 1,000 damage value. So they kind of screen away here the hulking Knights of Nurgle. The Hawk Riders losing some shots as they pursue, and the Wild Hunters, of course, with superior speed, managed to catch up a few more models, but don't want to overcommit into those Marauders and end up taking a really inefficient engagement. The biggest thing right now in Domination, from the limited experience I've had and the few replays I have seen, is to focus on trading above everything else. And, I mean, that was kind of the case to a degree before, but it seems like now especially, just you focus on trading as much as possible, and try to, yeah, just try and win the battle as much as you can. The objectives kind of being somewhat secondary. What they did was, instead of needing 5,000 points to win, you need 1,500, but instead of getting 5 points per point captured per second, you now only get 1. So they did like a 5-to-1 squish, right? Like 5,000 points to 1,000, then plus an extra 500 to make the games in practice about 50% longer, maybe not fully 50% longer, but at least the capture phase, right, with the actual capture points open, should last longer, and just games overall obviously should last a little bit longer, especially if they're close. And the idea there was to give range units more of a chance to make plays, because oftentimes before, melee factions were so dominant because you would just come in and range units wouldn't have enough time to accrue the value they needed to actually win. And here, this Wood Elf player just going for an all melee mostly build. I mean, yeah, just this one Glade Guard Starfire Shafts coming out at this point. Obviously, the Hawk Rider's also a little bit of ranged attacks there. Force Dragon, a little bit ranged attack, but mostly been using all of these units in melee. Over here on the far side, though, Wood Elves get a little bit caught up. Wild Hunters of Kurnos, they get caught by Marauders and Demon Spew there. That's going to be very inefficient engagement for them. Nurgle Knights also sweeping into the center, so things are looking a little bit rough for the Wood Elves out in the open, but at the same time, they are starting to get pretty decisive control of this objective. And these Stag Knights aren't going to be taking the dot from that Dwellers Below, so they won't be taking the full damage, and especially for a lower model count unit like Stag Knights, that's where a lot of the damage is going to come from on Dwellers Below. So for those of you guys who, for whatever reason, didn't see my other video about it, Dwellers Below, you look all the way at the bottom of the tooltip, does have a huge single target, it's essentially Spirit Leech, right? Like, you can literally just compare it 1-to-1 to Spirit Leech, and as a result, it does really good single target damage, but that contact effect won't hit friendly targets, so you can kind of cast it into your own monsters and cavalry and whatnot, and should be mostly fine. Dragon's also going to sweep in, catch these Knights of Nurgle. Dragon, of course, has poison as well to bring down the already pretty slow speed of these Nurgle Knights even slower. And they also get terrified away there. Nice little follow-up charge from the Hagbane tips, just to kind of eat some of that unit while they're routing. Basically get some free damage from a unit that otherwise would have a hard time dealing with them. Festus, of course, also directly nerfed in the 2.1 update. Got both his healing and Mortis auras nerfed, although still has been able to heal cap here. Hasn't really faced the direct snipe. I mean, definitely the Treeman and the Dragon together could snipe him if Goblin Cleaver here went all in for a big snipe attempt, but I understand using the Dragon in a more mobile fashion to kind of try and control some of these other objectives. But for the time being, again, just focusing on trading and value play. And look at this, even casting Dwellers Below is going to do some pretty good damage to Festus. The Nurgle player also kind of slipping on the micro a little bit here, leaves him in the area of effect. It's pretty easy to miss, honestly, especially with a green character in a green AoE like that. Can be definitely easy to miss that damage, but I mean, at this point, capture-wise, Nurgle's in a very good position, but positionally, in terms of like actual battlefield control and, you know, obviously the value trading is going pretty poorly for them. Nice top-down breath attacks. Not going to do as much to an infantry unit. Probably want to use that on Festus. Might have been a little bit of a misclick, but there we go. Finally, the Forest Dragon drops down onto Festus, and as we've seen with other replays, Dragon-type units against a squishy foot character tends to go pretty good for the Dragon-type unit, especially with a non-immune to psychology, you know, heal-capped Festus, who is fairly low in terms of defensive stats. Just gets easily seen off there and just straight up killed by the Dragon, actually, there, which is great. That's going to give a huge leadership debuff to all of the Nurgle units across the field here. Wood Elves also sweeping in with some mobility of their own. Starfire Shafts going to be setting up on this objective. War Dancers, the Hagbane tips, and the Hawk Riders also, again, just blocking these units. Between the Hagbane tips poisoning them, the Hawk Riders blocking with their charge, just allowing the Hagbane tips a little bit more time to capture. Allow those Starfire Shafts, the War Dancers to get into position. Nice plays there. More Forsaken piling in on this objective, but the Soul Grinder, once again, out of commission. That Soul Grinder actually managed to stay alive. I didn't actually check the HP there. Would have been impressive, but Yeah, at this point, the Nurgle player's just struggling in value trades. They're piling in more units on these side objectives to try and keep control, but over time here, yeah, man, Exalted Plague Bearer is already very slow, going to take significant damage from that, and will just really struggle to get out of that area of effect. They're even trying to get into a position to throw at the dragon, which, there we go, that's more like it in terms of an anti-infantry breath attack. Side-shotting down the line from a distance, textbook. Does a huge amount of damage, ends up breaking the Eternal Guards there as well, at least one of those units. But the Dragon can always throw a quick follow-up charge. Toads here also piling in. The Treeman will trade very well into the Toads because of the armor and the magic damage. Toads also have pretty poor stats overall, but Death's Heads are still getting some damage in throwing, especially on that Dragon. Those magical armor-piercing Death's Heads will obviously do quite a bit there, but more Wood Elves mobility, just more than Nurgle can handle in this late game. They traded too far down and maybe could have left some Marauders there to defend that objective against the Wild Riders, but even still, I mean, they are just Marauders at the end of the day. War Dancer is going to get in here and cut it up, at least, again, holding this blob back from the objective as long as possible. Choke points on this Mountains of More map mean you can definitely pull off plays like that a little bit better. That being said, I mean, the Treeman I said was going to absolutely destroy this blob. He ends up taking quite a bit of damage here, and the Forest Dragon, I think, just waiting on its last breath attack, perhaps, to be able to shoot into this blob. Hagbane tips also. Nope, just charging down in. There we go. Come give the Ancient Treeman some support there. And, oh man, another nasty big volley from those Death's Heads. And it looks like the Blade Riders are just going to side charge in. Nope, having some weird kind of line of sight issues. They run up super close to shoot, but then, yeah, just kind of bugs out there. That's fine. Wood Elves' decisive control of these two objectives over here. The Wild Riders secure that far objective. Can now collapse down through this little wooded hillock and try and hammer an anvil with these War Dancers while they're still alive. Starfire Shafts also raining in. Marauders are probably pretty cold in the snow if they can even feel anything at this point. They are Nurgle Marauders, after all, but yeah, give them a little Starfire to help warm them up, right? It's the only polite thing to do at this point. Wild Riders crushing charge there, breaks both of those units, and at this point it's a decisive lead for the Wood Elves. Not only in terms of value, they've got the Firebark Elders now out here. Festus is back with his healing elixirs, but that does mean the Firebark Elders now have a place. They can come in here, utilize that fire damage to reduce the healing received on this big blob and just keep grinding it out. Of course, with high defense and high armor as well, Nurgle's not going to have a lot of great tools for dealing with them, and especially like in this build, right? There's no Warriors Griffins, really. And it's not a unit you would necessarily expect to need against the Wood Elves, but the tree units are definitely something to think about, especially for Nurgle, where, and even if you do bring the armor-piercing, like, you know, Marauders, Warriors, Chosen, whatever, they are still going to, they're going to be very snipeable, obviously, by missile units. That's the biggest thing, right? The slow speed does make them a little bit tricky to operate, and of course then there's the physical resistance as well that will help kind of shave off some of that damage, whereas the demon units for Nurgle lack armor piercing pretty broadly outside of a few key units, but of course they have magic damage, so it's a bit of a trade-off for sure. I'd imagine that it'd just be better to have the armor piercing damage, but hard to say. Ooh, nice little attempted retreat there with the Starfire Shafts, as they're pretty much out of ammo, but the Furies do manage to get on them in time. Even still, though, they're fighting in the woods. The Starfire Shafts are not pushovers by any means. Glade Guards have reasonably decent stats for a skirmish-type unit, skirmish infantry especially, so we'll be able to hold out for some time there. Hounds sweep into the center. Hounds, I believe, got their capture weight nerfed down to cavalry capture weight. I want to say they were infantry capture weight before, but it's definitely a hit to, like, Nurgle, obviously Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen, not so much for Slanesh, but for a little bit for Khorne as well. For Vampire counts too, I believe Direwolves had infantry capture weight, now they do not, so definitely something to be aware of. And yeah, again, we'll see how the meta is shifted. It may be enough with the timing changes, and then of course nerfs to certain spells and not nerfs to others, that perhaps we'll see a lot more Wood Elves, High Elves, Empire, Bretonnia. Although, to be fair, I was seeing a lot of Bretonnia already. And Like, I had been seeing more High Elves recently, too. Wood Elves is one I know that a lot of people were struggling with, but hopefully they can perform a little bit better. Here, certainly, they were able to defeat Nurgle opponent. More Wild Riders rushing in here. Nice crushing charge. You shatter those Warhounds. Break both units. Cause a terror rout as the Ancient is still in vicinity. Also continuing to just smash Toads and Forsaken and just generate this huge pile of bodies here. Of course, Firebark Elders, as mentioned, are nerfing the healing out of all of these units. If we take a look here, anything that has that on fire contact effect, are they actually getting hits, though, is the question. Yeah, it looks like the Firebark Elders were kind of bugging out there for a minute, not actually hitting anything, but, yeah. Should be reducing the healing. Yeah, see, there we go. On fire, we get that on fire contact effect. And there we go. So, definitely useful to have the Firebark Elders here, as I mentioned, for a multitude of different reasons, but Vanguard also on all the tree units is really nice for Wood Elves. It's something that definitely needs to be explored more against factions that have somewhat weak anti-large AP, which Nurgle is, even still after the DLC, one of those. I mean, certainly the Armor-Piercing Warriors help, but anyway. It's a little bit of bump and grind over here. Over here, some Nurglings attempting to cap from some Blade Riders and just kind of failing to entirely. Here we go. Let's just keep it here and watch the Ancient Tree Man fight it out with some Toads. Firebark Elders also holding. We've got some Knights of Nurgle charging down. Depending on the angle that they actually connect with these Treekin, they will either not get their charge bonus if they do get the bracing bonus here. Let's see. It's hard to tell. I don't think the Treekin got their bracing bonus. They technically do have charge defense versus large. I believe, do the Ancients also have it? They have expert charge defense, yeah, even against infantry, which is a little bit of a janky interaction anyway, but yeah, interesting to note there. Knights of Nurgle, though, do come in, get a pretty good charge. They're also going to tank fairly well in this type of an engagement. There's not a lot of direct anti-large AP here, just the low-tier Patronal Guards, which aren't going to do a ton, but the Ancient's going to come in, and I mean, these Wood Elf units are also very tanky for what the Nurgle Knights can actually punch back. And in terms of timing, it's just too much value lost, and it ends up being a nice Wood Elf victory over Nurgle. It's interesting to see for sure, and I mean, build-wise, some questions on both sides, perhaps, but I do like the pick, actually, of the Ancient Tree Man here. 5,000 damage value, grinding on points, 34,000 total damage dealt. I mean, Dwellers is super strong right now. He's a durable lord, can Vanguard also, as mentioned, and yeah, against something like Nurgle, where their missiles really aren't enough of a threat to him. They can be in certain niche situations, but most of the time, you're going to be able to screen or heal through the damage there. Dragon also ended up being a really nice pick. Almost 3,000 damage value there. 20,000 damage dealt overall. Hawk Riders used a fairly good effect. Kind of a lot of people sort of discount their melee prowess, but I would consider them a straight-up hybrid shooting melee unit. You do have to use them as a little bit of a glass cannon. They're very fragile, but as shown here, in a support role, charging down from the air to deal some armor-piercing damage to some enemy armored mobile units, especially. That's kind of a very niche use case, but it is definitely a good one, and one that's useful for the Wood Elves. Blade Riders also doing a great job. I was surprised at how well the War Dancers did. I know a lot of the time they're fighting just like low-tier Marauders and stuff, but it's interesting that, again, in my mind, War Dancers are too fragile to work in a situation like this, but I guess looking at Nurgle's side, I mean, they really didn't have a lot of direct damage dealer units. Like, they had some Forsaken, which trade okay, but, I mean, like, the Nurglings get blended up. Even Furies, obviously counting as infantry, get blended up. I might have liked to see some more Toads out of Nurgle here, perhaps, and maybe an over-reliance on the Marauders a little bit as well. Hard to say. A lot of stuff does generate some pretty good value. But it's interesting. Very, very interesting. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What's your thoughts on the new Domination length? If you've had a chance to play the new system, let me know your thoughts. If you don't care at all about Domination, that's totally fine. And you're probably not watching this video at this point anyway. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe. If you're not, hit that bell. Thanks again. See you next time.